So last but not least, can I introduce Mercedes Maroto Valer, who's the UK champion for the Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre.
Thanks very much. I hope you can hear me. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides. And first, I want to start by saying thank you very much for inviting me today. I think it's a real pleasure to be here, but also following on the previous two presentations, it makes really a lot of sense what I want to share with you now. We heard about the really setting the scene from Lord Devon about climate change, why it's important. Quite rightly said, we don't have a vaccine for climate change. And also I think in terms of Terry about the need to actually work together, as Jen already said as well, collaboration and innovation are going to be key. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So these are graphs probably many of you are familiar with. In my presentation, what I want to focus is on the role of biotechnology for decarbonizing industrial sectors. And kind of a couple of points looking at those graphs. Many of you probably know the manufacturing sector and construction sector. Roughly, they contribute around 12% to the CO2 emissions. But if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, what that graph is telling us is actually, not unexpectedly, is quite a bit of a concentration of where these CO2 emissions are coming from. And in fact, those industrial clusters that you have in there, those areas of highest concentration, we are looking in the order of close to 50% of the total manufacturing and construction sector emissions. So this is really quite important because then when we look in terms of the options, we look at the race and the pace at which we have to deploy technologies. It gives us an indication as well of where we are going to be key points that we need to start considering. And the graph on the right-hand side really brings that point of the urgency, if you want. It is true that the targets are for 2050, 2045 for Scotland, with some intermediate targets as well before then. But I think what is really clear is that the 2020s and into the early 2030s are going to be really key in terms of actually deploying the technologies that we need to be able to achieve our net zero targets. So it's this message of urgency, it's this message of pace that I think we heard already in the previous presentations. And the graph on the right-hand side as well illustrates a point that Lord Devon mentioned as well, that there is no silver bullet. I think probably I would say is that we have a lot of silver bullets. And I think what we need to do is really make sure that we develop and deploy them at the rate and the potential that they have. And one final point in that slide is policy. Technologies cannot be considered in isolation. We need to make sure we have policy, as Terry mentioned. We need to make sure that we have business models. And also what is critical is that we actually, all these help us to drive reductions of emissions, not driving manufacturing overseas. We want to make sure that we prevent carbon leakage. We want to make sure that those clusters that you have on the left-hand side, that actually attract inward investment and we protect the jobs. Those clusters right now probably are in the order of 1.5 million jobs. We move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So some of you may be familiar with this. What are the challenges that we have for industrial decarbonization? You have them on those blue boxes on the top. It's a complex emissions because it's not only from the fuel, also come from the processes that are already highly integrated. Most of them, they have high temperature demands. We of course also have to work with plants that have long lifetimes. Most of these plants, they produce low cost commodity products. So again, going back to this policy driving CO2 emissions reductions. And also we are competing in global markets. And so we need to consider all these challenges. Opportunities, as it has been already mentioned before, they are huge for the whole area of biomass and biotechnology. But one thing I want to make the point here is that the total scale of these contributions and the pace again with these contributions, the opportunity is what we need to work together to make sure that we define it and we realize the potential of all these technologies. Going from the left-hand side, opportunities are in the area of heat, in the area of replacement of materials, in the area of fuels, but all these will have to be realized quickly within the next 2020s to 2030 years. And if you look on the right-hand side, for instance, taking the energy white paper that was published on the back end of last year, again, for instance, the role of BECCS also has to be quantified, and we need to make sure that we develop that full potential of biotechnology. And of course, there are issues, and this is something that may have already been discussed before, and we need to consider around potential availability and sustainability that is going to be key in terms of making sure that we do reach net zero. Next slide, please. Thank you. So if we look at the industrial clusters mission, that's where the focus of our work is. Some of you may already be familiar. This is part of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. The whole program is 170 million. And in addition, it will be matched by 260 million. The graph that you have for the map on the right-hand side indicates those 6 largest clusters, the largest emitters of CO2. You can see they go all the way from Scotland, Grangemouth, Teesside, Humber, Southampton, South Wales, and the Merseyside area. Well, the program here is actually divided into 3 strands, as you have them there. The first strand is demonstrators and shared infrastructure, and the value is 132 million. It's the second element of roadmaps, cluster plans, value of 8 million, and is the Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre, IDRIC, that is of the value of 20 million. The thing that really makes me excited is that I think this is one of the very few opportunities in the UK, and I would dare to say globally, where we actually are looking at infrastructure deployment, we are looking at roadmaps and a research and innovation center working hand in hand. And this is really going to make a difference when it comes to collaboration. Maybe I should add as well that the element 2 that you have listed in there is already phase 2 is in progress, and the demonstrators and the research and innovation center, IDRIC, they are actually to be confirmed as we move into phase 2. What is the ambition here? Because this is a mission program. So the ambition that we have here was actually RISE as a result of the energy white paper. And what we are aiming here is to deliver 4 low carbon clusters by 2030. That's not far at all. And that's why I said the 2020s are key. And at least 1 net zero cluster by 2040. Next slide, please. So there are 3 particular key elements that we want to help to realize within IDRIC to decarbonize or accelerate the decarbonization of industrial clusters. We need to have these collaborations at the scale and pace. I've already said that before several times, and we heard that from the previous speakers. We also need to have these solutions that integrate as a systems level approach, technology, policy, and business model. And they do that at the right scale. We are looking to do this at the cluster scale, and this has not been achieved before. And the skills are going to be critical. I don't think we have talked yet about the skills, but really the need for the skills, the need for training, retraining, is really going to be fundamental for us to achieve net zero. If you look in terms of the 10-point plan, right there, there is 250,000 jobs opportunities into this transition for net zero. Next slide, please. So if we look in terms of IDRIC, what is our convening power? What is the partnership that we are bringing together? So throughout 2020, we actually engaged 142 partners spread all over the UK, and actually some of our partners are also international and international corporations. And together they actually have made a pledge also bringing £10 million additional match support to help these clusters to decarbonize. You can see the breakdown there. They go from research organizations, industry associations, NGOs, policymakers, and government bodies. And it's really this unique bringing together this research and innovation landscape with policy and business models that give us a very step ahead in terms of being successful in achieving the mission goals. And moving to the last slide, please. Thank you. So we've been talking about we need to deploy these technologies. We need the innovation, as Terry mentioned as well. And I think here there are a couple of areas where IDRIC is going to be playing a key role. If you want to talk about technology readiness levels, as you have them there, but without going into details, really what we have to do, looking into the left-hand side, we need to make sure that we enable what is going to be a next wave of technologies, and also that we speed the deployment of the current technologies. In some cases, they need to be maybe a little bit demonstrated or maybe just deploy at the scale. working with funders, with industry, with innovation and tech transfer, with a wide range of really universities and research centers as well across the UK and internationally. And if you look at the right-hand side there, what is going to be really critical is that we evidence share and we cross-learn and stimulate that cross-learning that is going to happen from these deployment projects, that we address the wider issues. Or in other words, that we help with this technology diffusion that is going to come out from the demonstrators and the cluster roadmaps. And that's all I wanted to share. If we just kind of, I think the next slide is just to say thank you. Thanks again for the opportunity. It's been really a pleasure following on the steps of Lord Devon and Terry. And thanks very much, Jen, again. So over to you. Thank you.